Hello, this is Bo Ballou, and I'm the director of the Purdue Center for Regional Development, of course, at Purdue University. Today, I want to share with you some of the information about how to carry out a successful focus group meeting, something that I think is really valuable to anybody with a state agency or organization that works closely with the public. It's a phenomenal way to gather information that could be of value to you as you try to do some of your planning activities as an agency, as an organization, or any community-based group that's trying to find programs that is responsive to the needs of its stakeholders. I'm going to be covering three things today. One is how do we define what a focus group is all about? And then we'll share some of the key features of a focus group meeting. And there are 6 of them I want to share with you today. And finally, walk you through the process of conducting a successful focus group meeting. So simply put, what is a focus group? First of all, it's a carefully planned discussion that's intended to get input from a number of people in a non-threatening environment on the topic of specific interest to the group conducting that focus group. It typically is very comfortable and enjoyable discussions because people are offered the opportunity to share their ideas and perceptions about the topics being discussed. And one key thing about focus groups is that as people talk, as they share their perspectives, it somewhat influences others in the meeting with regard to how they look at the particular issues or challenges that are being examined in the meeting. There are 6 features of a focus group that I want to briefly talk about. One, very obviously, people conducted it with a series of groups. These individuals have some key characteristics. Discussion is very focused. It produces data, and those data are typically qualitative data, something that's really quite valuable because it gives you information over and above what you would typically get by looking at statistical data or secondary data on your community accounting. I have here a PowerPoint slide that's very difficult probably to read because it's got a lot of detail in it, but this is a handout that I am providing to you that you can use to, again, better gather information about the 6 features of a focus group meeting. First of all, typically we will try to reach 8 to 12 people, or at least try to recruit and ensure there's about 8 to 12 people in the meeting. And as you'd expect, if you have less than that, the richness of the discussion is compromised. But if you get too big in terms of a meeting, then you don't give people the opportunity to weigh in on the variety of questions that you're posing to them. So really 8 to 12 is kind of almost like an ideal number to shoot for. The second thing is we recommend that it be conducted in multiple sessions. And what I mean by that is that you want to try to carry out at least a minimum of 3 focus group meetings. And again, it's because you want to try to get a diversity of people to weigh in. And sometimes, let's face it, you're going to have a focus group session constituted of people who just aren't saying very much. So having more focus groups ensures that you're getting the richness and the breadth of discussion and input that you need. The people that you invite have certain characteristics, and this may be a surprise to you, but we typically try to find a way to identify people to be part of a given focus group who have common attributes, similar characteristics. They may be from a particular neighborhood, or they may be individuals who are all with local government entities, or local economic development organizations, or the educational system, the financial community, bankers, or business and industry. It depends on the questions that you're posing, but again, think about what are these pools of people, what similar characteristics that we want to invite. And the reason why we recommend multiple sessions of focus group meetings is so that you can have these different groups weighing in, but collectively you've gotten a lot of input from a variety of different people in your community. Typically it involves people who don't know each other, but at times, particularly in smaller communities in Indiana, that's pretty darn difficult. But it is something at least you can strive for. At times that's just simply not possible. It's a data collection procedure. It's designed to gather the perceptions and input and perspectives of different people in the community. It is not designed for that group to come to some agreement or consensus about some type of plan or effort that should be launched. The meeting makes use of qualitative data. Uh, People are talking about their opinions, their beliefs, their attitudes, their values. These are all come out. They're expressed in these focus group meetings quite frequently. And this is obviously because you're asking a series of open-ended questions that encourage that type of discussion. And when I say the discussion is focused, it's that the questions you ask are carefully predetermined and they're sequenced. And they're presented in a manner that they're understandable to the participants. You'll hear a little bit more about this, but it's called a questioning route. We have a specific natural logical sequence in these focus group sessions. It's not a free-for-all. It's not by the seat of your pants. It's really, really well-designed set of questions, and you'll hear more about this in a little bit in this webinar. So what's the process of conducting group interviews? I'm just going to say these are the things you have to keep in mind when you do this kind of work. And there are essentially three key things I want to talk about. First of all, we got to plan the study. We then conduct the interviews. And finally, we work on how do we analyze and report the results of these focus group meetings. But with regard to planning the study, there are 6 components. I don't have a lot of detail on this, but just keep these in mind as you start designing a focus group meeting. First, what's the purpose? Are you trying to get information on a particular topic? Could it be a program that you've launched as an agency and you're trying to get feedback from people as to how well that's going? Main Street programs or programs with regard to regional stellar programs, whatever OCRA is carrying out. And it has a multitude of, obviously, programs. If you want to gather public input about these programs, and the focus will be on each of these individual programs within a given focus group. But it could be something else. It could be, hey, we want to look at housing, we want to look at broadband, we want to look at jobs, we want to look at talent. That could be the general purpose of what you're trying to do. We also want to have you think about, is focus group the appropriate way to get the information you need? In some cases, it really is. In other cases, it isn't. So you've got to give yourself time to think through, when should I use this and when is it not appropriate? Third, who do you want to study or who do you at least want to reach out to gather input? Is it local officials? Is it in terms of government agency people? Is it school system? Is it Main Street retailers? Is it industry or business? Whatever it is, you got to determine who it is that you're trying to study and try to examine. And some topics, as you know, you're going to want to have multiple entities weighing in. Others may be a little bit more focused in terms of the kinds of people you'd like to reach out and be part of these meetings. Fourth thing, it comes obvious, listen to your target audience. There's nothing more frustrating to people than to give you 2 or 3 hours of their time, only to find out that these inputs were not really used at all. So I know the Office of Community and Rural Affairs is quite good at having sessions like this and really utilizing that information. But keep in mind, it's really important to somehow provide your audience with some feedback that, hey, you know what, your input really mattered and we're really doing some things as a result of it. Fifth, select the location of your focus group. As you know, there are some places where people won't go. We've discovered that some places like colleges or universities is not, people don't always like to go on a campus because of parking problems and whatnot. Others don't necessarily want to go to a faith-based center because that may be different from the faith that they follow. So find a neutral place that is likely to be hospitable and attractive to a number of people. A community center, a place that's really open to the public would be an example of places to do these focus group sessions. And then finally, take time to develop a plan and figure out how much is it going to cost to do this. These don't necessarily come cheap. It's not a no-cost effort. There's travel involved, there's people involved. You may need some professional transcribing assistance, which we'll talk to you about in a little bit. But again, think about an estimate of what the budget would look like if you want to carry out these kinds of sessions across the state or in a particular region of Indiana. So what I want to talk about now is the interviews and talk about the participants, the questions, and then the moderating skills. Uh, who should be invited? Well, we recommend, as I said earlier, at least 3 focus group sessions, and you want to invite about 25% more people than what you'd like to ideally have as a final number. And as you know, that's because last things happen. People say, I'm coming, but they've had a family emergency or something, they got tied up at work. Just a whole host of different things can happen that you or they had not anticipated. So always over invite with the hope that you'll have the ideal number that you typically would like to have for your session. It's always a good idea to contact people ahead of time. Maybe a couple weeks out, talk to them by telephone about the focus group session, invite them. If they happen to be professionals, they typically need more of an advance time with regard to setting this up. 1 to 2 months in advance is not asking too much really for this. It's really important that you contact them and let them know well ahead of time so they can place it on their calendars. Send a personalized invitation just after the phone conversation or in-person invitation about a week before the session, if at all possible. Or at least do something to remind them. It could be an email, very nice email about it. And finally, if you can, it's ideal to phone each person who said, yes, I'm coming before the day of the focus group to remind them about the meeting and make sure that they are planning to attend. As far as focus group questions, these are some rules of thumb, I guess, to share with you. One, the focus group session typically has about a dozen questions. And these questions are designed to spark interest and ideas on behalf of the participants. And what we're trying to do via these questions is unlock the perceptions, the perspectives, the values, the views of different participants with regard to the questions that we have posed to them. Now, let me get into what types of questions should I be developing and incorporating into this meeting. There's a science to this thing, believe it or not, but there are like 5 different steps to think about with regard to your questions. We call this an opening question. We have introductory questions. We have questions that serve as transitions. Then we have the key questions, and finally, the ending question to bring the focus group meeting to a close. And what I'd like to do is kind of walk you through each of these 5 components of questions to hopefully give you some food for thought. Typically, the opening question is what we call a round robin. You ask each person to share their perspective on that particular question. And it's not only is it designed to provide quick responses by each participant, maybe 10 to 20 seconds. We try to avoid them going on forever. It's got to be a brief response. And it helps identify the characteristics of the participants might have in common. It also, by the way, is a great icebreaker. It's just a great way for people to start feeling comfortable before you get into the heavier questions that you're going to be sharing with them a little bit later in the session. These questions are typically factual as opposed to opinion-based and whatnot. And for example, in some work we did before on housing, the opening question we asked was this: do you currently live or work in this county? Both, neither, or how long have you either lived or worked in this county? So that was a factual. Did you just want them to say, hey, yes, I live here, I work here. How long have you been living in this county or this community? Those are all very factually based questions that are really easy for people to respond to. And again, begin to make them feel a bit more comfortable with the meeting. The introductory questions are designed to introduce the topic of the meeting, but in a very general way. It gives them a chance to reflect on past experiences and their connection with the overall topic. Again, not critical to the overall purpose of the focus group meeting. It's not the meat of what you're really trying to gather, but again, it introduces the general topic that you're going to be focusing on. But it does have that ability to foster conversation and interaction among participants. For example, one of the introductory questions we used before is this. I'd like to ask you to briefly share your thoughts about your county. First of all, what would you say are the 1 to 2 things that you like most about your county? And another one could be, how about 1 or 2 things that concerned you most about your county? Very broad, but again, you began to introduce the fact that you're going to be talking to them about something related to their county, or in this, it could be a community. In the case, you could frame it by saying community. The transition questions help move the conversations into the key questions that you want to explore. They're a logical link between the introductory questions and the key questions that'll be following this transition phase. During this phase of the meeting, the participants are becoming more aware of how others are viewing the topic. So, for example, in the housing study, we asked a transition question such as, how would you describe the current availability of housing in your county? How would you rate the quality of the homes of both owner and rental properties in the area? So again, you get into some things related to housing, getting a little bit more specific, but again, it's not quite the key question yet. But again, beginning to hone in on the key topic that you really want to gather from them. The key questions are the key drivers of the study. It tends to be 2 to 5 in number. These are typically the kinds of questions that when you say, you know what, I think I want to do a focus group, or we need to do a focus group on this particular topic. These may be the core questions that you design ahead of time. And that's where these are placed with regard to the meeting. So it's really important that you give attention to capturing the information that's shared. So you need to make sure that you have colleagues who are with you, who are capturing everything that's being said in the meeting, likely through a transcribing process, either by literally taking detailed notes, or in a minute I'll tell you other strategies that you could do to try to make sure you gather all the input that's needed. Again, in the housing study we conducted in the past, here's a couple of the key questions we asked. Are there key factors that may be limiting the availability of a good mix of quality housing in the county? And second of all, what strategies do you recommend be considered by local leaders in order to expand the quantity and quality of housing in your county for people of all income levels? So as you can see, we've honed in now specifically about why our housing availability so limited, and what may be the factors that's impeding a broader array of housing being available, and is it meeting the needs of a variety of demographic groups in their community? So that's a really, and again, very specific. That's what we really wanted to get to in this particular housing focus group sessions that we held. Then finally, you have the ending questions. They bring closure to the discussion. It allows the participants to reflect on the whole host of comments that have been offered by different people themselves and others during the course of the focus group session. But it also allows you to do a check to make sure that the information that's been gathered by you and by your transcribers is accurate, okay? And this ending question or questions can be of 3 types. One of them is the all things considered is used when the participants state their final position on a critical area or areas of concern. For example, if it was housing, give us your final thoughts about housing in your county or your community. And this is often asked, again, in a round robin or vote casting or prioritizing manner. We typically don't do vote casting. Some do. It may be more, okay, here's what's your thought about what the top priority would be. And they could, if you want to, then as a group collectively identify. But again, it's not a consensus building process. So the key is to give them a chance to weigh in on a final thoughts. The second option is what we call a summary question. It's asked after the moderator has given a short summary, 2 to 3 minutes of the key ideas or questions that emerge from the discussion. And after that person has done the summary, he or she may ask participants the following: is this an adequate summary? okay? And then you get the response from people in the session. And there's a third option called the final question. Following the summary question, the moderator gives a short overview of the purpose of the study. And following the overview, he then or she then asks the following question: have we missed anything? Is there something that somehow was left unsaid, or there's a summary I provided missing some key thing that came out of our discussion? So those are the three components or three options you have for the ending questions. I want to share with you a couple slides on moderating skills. One is as you moderate, if you're going to be the moderator, the thing is to, first of all, welcome people and give them an overview of the topic that you're going to be talking about, just a nice summary or overview of what the meeting is going to be about. You can express the need or desire to create ground rules. This could be done in two ways. One, you could come in with your list of what you think are important ground rules, such as not talking to each other, being respectful, not debating. This is not a debate. Just again, the important rules of having a really effective focus group meeting. And you can then invite people to say, hey, is there anything I'm missing? Like somebody could say, please have cell phones either on mute or completely off. This things that you think are important to ensure that session goes along smoothly. And then you ask that first question, the one that we talked about in an earlier slide with regard to how you start that focus group session. One thing that's important is what your skills or your colleague, whoever does the moderating, it's really important that they understand a couple things. One, it's important that that individual be able to anticipate the flow of the discussion. And you want to give license to people to express different points of view. And again, not to get into debate. You know, it takes a good moderator to know how to intervene and to make sure that there's not this give and take between people who may have disagreements on a particular topic. So you want them to express their points of view, but do this again in a very respectful way. And you want to probably learn a couple techniques. The first one is we call the pause. As you pose a question, be patient. You got to give people a chance to think about that question and to then be able to figure out what it is they want to say in response to that question. You know, we always get nervous when we pose a question and nobody says anything. It may not be that they don't have anything to offer. It may be that they're just trying to think through that question and be able to respond in a very effective way. And if they say something, don't be afraid to say, look, can you give me a little bit more information about this? You know, explain this further, or can you give me an example of what you're talking about? That probe is a really valuable technique that good moderators use as well, to enrich the breadth of what is being discussed with regard to these questions. But as a moderator, there are certain red flags that we want to make sure people are aware of. One is to restrict the head nodding, since it tends to be interpreted by the participants as a signal of agreement. Nodding, or even if you shake your head back and forth saying, you know what, I don't agree with you, that's something a moderator is that's a no-no for any moderator. Also try to avoid making any kind of value judgments with regard to the comments, like, oh, that's good, yeah, that's excellent, thank you, perfect. Don't say anything where it would be interpreted as, hey, I think what you just said is great. Again, the neutrality is really, really critical. So use words like, okay, all right, thank you, but not thank you with, I think that's a great idea. So you can just say thank you. That doesn't say, that's not giving you any value judgment as to how you're interpreting that response. Neutral gestures or comments are critical. The key thing I've seen in focus groups where a moderator does not abide by that is when they'll say something to the effect, now, I know I shouldn't be saying anything, but let me share with you my thoughts. That's absolute no-no when it comes to focus group meetings. That the moderator truly has to remain neutral when it comes to conducting this particular session. Okay, what do I do with all this information? Well, you have a number of options there, 4 on this continuum that we want to share with you. One is that you could be you could have phenomenal memory, ability to retain facts and figures and whatnot. So you can say, you know what, I trust my ability to memorize everything that's being said, the key points, and be able to jot those down after the meeting is done. You would be one of few people who's able to do that well. I urge you not to rely on memory base, because there's going to be a lot of key things said during the course of that meeting that you're probably not going to remember. A second option is on that continuum is note based, and that would be where somebody is actually taking notes of the session, trying to capture the key points. I often recommend, if that's the option you want to go, to try to have a couple people doing this, because each of them are likely to capture different elements of the meeting, and together you're going to have a fuller, more robust set of notes with regard to that session and the input provided by people. A third option is what we call tape-based or digital recording. That would, you're really going to be getting word for word what is being said, but it's really important the participants be aware that you're doing that. I don't think most people object to it, but there may be individuals who would object, and either they will be excused from the focus group meeting if they don't want to be recorded, or you just abandon that option. If you have, particularly if you have people who are willing to take really good notes, a couple of people from your organization or all volunteers. Then finally, we have the transcript base. That is, if you record it, then you can have an individual who literally take word for word, will type up word for word everything that's been said during the course of that session. This is, again, the most elaborate, the most intense, the most valuable approach, but it takes time, and you have to have somebody who has the ability to transcribe all that information. I said earlier about, now keep in mind the cost of doing a focus group session. If you really want to go the transcribing view or approach to the data being collected, there's a cost to that, unless you have somebody in your agency or organization that's willing to do that. There are professional transcribers who do this great, but they do charge a few dollars an hour. So if that's the way you want to go, make sure you plan on that with regard to your budget. So as you can tell, that's a continuum going from the least intensive to the most intensive. So my recommendation is figure out where on that continuum you want your notes to be taken. If you have any questions about what I've said, I can be reached at the Purdue Center for Regional Development, and I'm sharing with you both my telephone number and my email. I would welcome any questions you may have. I love doing focus group meetings, and I hope you will find it of value to you as well. Thank you, and have a good day.